No.
I wish I had a vacation mode.
Yeah.
You need livestock, Kyle.
No.
You need more livestock than microbes, okay?
No.
I wish I had a vacation mode. You
Yeah.
need livestock, Kyle.
No.
You need more livestock than microbes, okay?
No.
I wish I had a vacation mode.
Yeah,
You need
so okay,
livestock,
so
Kyle.
I think I've got to figure out how
More
to do it to where it's
livestock
not
than
having that
microbes,
feedback.
okay?
No.
We're gonna have a giant loop. I think I've got to figure out how to do it to where it's not having that feedback. There we go. I muted it on YouTube Live, so hopefully that's live to where everybody else can watch it. Let me get to my YouTube channel. So for people that may be watching this now live on YouTube, this is our first initial live YouTube show with Young Red Angus. I'll let that pull up. So for those of you who don't know, my name is Jay Young, and this is our first live YouTube streaming show. And for my guest, I have Ryan Gibbs and Kyle Schnell. So I figured I would talk to you guys. I'm going to ask Kyle and Ryan just questions about their operation. They're going to talk about how they got into regenerative agriculture and some of the things they're doing on their operation. So let's go first with you, Ryan. Why don't you tell us who you are, where you're from, and what your farming operation looks like?
So yeah, I'm Ryan Gibbs, Eastern Iowa. I'm about a half an hour straight west of the Mississippi Dubuque. So we farm just over 400 acres here this next year. We are corn, soybeans, cereal rye, and buckwheat. Right now we do have a little bit of hay ground, some alfalfa. Raise anywhere from 10 to 50 head of feeder cattle every year on rotationally grazed pasture. I also have a 2,400 head hog building that I own and manage and operate. I sell cover crop seed. I'm a dealer with Iowa Cover Crop. So I got a business, Gibbs Field Ag. We sell and apply cover crop seed. I've been no-till cover cropping for going on 4 years, 5 years on one field. I basically started there about 4 or 5 years ago, seen a neighbor's field that looked a lot nicer than me and mine. And he was doing a lot less work. He was cover cropping and stuff. And I stopped by, talked to him. I said, I want to do what you're doing. And we walked out and looked at his soil and his field. And I just shook my head. I'm like, I've been doing it wrong. Unfortunately, I'm only 34. So I started, in my late 20s, no-till cover cropping. And my dad was pretty skeptical on it because I was renting the farm from him. And it was kind of those, well, if it doesn't work, it's your loss, not mine, because I'm renting the farm to you. So as long as he got a check, and he was fine with it. So we no-tilled that first year, and then we cover cropped after that and started doing all that. Now we're getting into diverse cover crop species mixing, integrating more livestock. We're trying to grow the livestock operation. We picked up some more farm ground for this year and just expanding. We did get some acres regenerative verified this year, so we're kind of in that program.
That's awesome.
So yeah, not all the fields, all but one field did get regenerative verified. So we're kind of working with markets with that. And we're going to expand upon that for next year. So my first year doing Johnson Sioux compost extract, I learned from Kyle. He had a field day that I went to, and I was kind of mind blown. So I kept in contact with him and kind of learned from him, and then reached out to other people and such as Jay Young here, reached out to him and watched some of his YouTube videos and stuff, and just kind of expanding my knowledge and my network and learning from people. And we've had success on the first year with it. So we learned a lot, and we're going to expand upon it next year and make better quality compost extract is kind of my goal. More diverse and just better quality than what we had this year. So that's kind of a little bit about me and my operation. So
awesome. How about you, Kyle?
All right, I'm Kyle Schnell, Newton, Iowa, Central Iowa, 1,000 acres, 500 certified organic, the other conventional. I think next year I won't have any GMO seed on my farm at all. So pretty proud of that. Started using cover crops around 2018. My dad did a bunch of it back in the late 90s, early 2000s. He passed away in 06. And then we had an individual custom farm for us. And then the cover crops kind of went by the wayside. And then I started farming when I graduated from Iowa State in 2013. But I didn't bring cover crops back because they didn't really fit in our cash flow. But until I realized how to use them more aggressively to actually make money with cover crops, then I started bringing them back. But I raise everything from corn, soy, alfalfa, oats, rye. Did some buckwheat this year as well. And then, yeah, I've got a cover crop business as well, too.
Awesome.
Johnson Stew. When did we start? Was that 3 years ago?
2020. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I did some compost extract the year before that. I bought from that Jeremiah there in Omaha or Lincoln.
Yeah. Jeremiah Picard. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. So kind of got started with him.
Okay. Ryan, I've got a follow-up question to something that you said on your intro there. Like, what do you mean, like, that your neighbor was like you were working harder than your neighbor that was doing conventional? What did you mean by that?
So I guess I was conventional farmer. I did heavy tillage. We'd rip it and then we'd hit it with a finisher in the spring. One year we did put fall anhydrous on. And then I did put anhydrous on, I think, one other year after that. And then since then I went completely away from anhydrous. I don't like working with it. And I like split applying my nitrogen. But I was, I'm making 2-3 passes across my field, doing this tillage and stuff. And my crops are drying out faster than his. And I don't know, it just seems like my crops didn't look as good as his right across the fence. And I had just moved to this 5 miles from my parents on the other side of the highway. I just bought this farm, moved here, kind of new neighbors. I knew who they were, but didn't really know them that well, and got to know them. And I just stopped in at his house one day and I'm like, your crops look really good. And you don't do tillage and you've been cover cropping. He goes, yeah, we've been doing it about 20 years. And I said, well, I want to learn what you're doing. Just kind of show me what you're doing. I don't need your numbers. I just want to know, like, what are you doing? You throwing cereal rye out there? Is it grass? Is it, what are you doing? And how are you doing it? And he gave me some good pointers and he was willing to kind of show me what he was doing and open up about it. And now since then, I've been doing so many different things on my farm with like multi-species and now compost extract and all this. I'm starting to teach him stuff. So,
That's awesome.
me and him get along really well, and it's great because we swap ideas back and forth. I share to him what I'm doing this year and next year, and kind of now he's implementing newer stuff, because he was just, we no-till and we put cereal rye down, and that's what worked for him. And now he's getting into multi-species and biological stuff, and and Haney soil testing and plant sap analysis, and kind of showing him what I'm doing and stuff. And that's kind of what I meant by that was, I was doing a lot more work with tillage wise, and I didn't feel it was paying off. So.
Gotcha. Follow up for you, Kyle. When you were talking about using, like when you went back to started using cover crops and you said that you were going to use them more efficiently or use them on your farm, what was it that you realized, that you needed to do different to be able to utilize the cover crops better?
Yeah, sure. Well, in the past, when we'd put the cereal rye on, we would have the co-op spread it, and then we'd vertical till it twice. It seemed like you got more seed to soil contact when you would vertical till it 2 different directions. But then we would always terminate early in the spring, when it's only 4 inches tall. And that would take an extra pass with the sprayer and an extra herbicide cost as well. So it actually cost us more money. Like we weren't using them in the right method to make more money. And then watching like Lauren Steinloggy and Jason Mock, how they were like relay cover cropping and actually raising soybeans and rye at the exact same time, and then harvesting it, and they're being more profitable that way. So then, I don't know, just using them in a manner to make money. And then you can use them to save herbicide costs now. Like I'm down to one pass on my soybeans and not seeing any weed pressure at all.
Okay, so when you
Just
say
little-
you're down to one pass, like what do you mean you're down to one pass? Like when does that pass take place? And you know, are you doing like you're planting cereal rye cover crop in the fall, and then you're terminating it and then planting soybeans into it?
No, so yeah, I'll start in the fall. I'll drill the cereal rye, like 60, 70 pounds, and then plant the soybeans into the standing rye in the springtime. And then I'll wait about 30 to 45 days and let them grow together, and then just spray it off if I'm not going to take the rye to seed.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. And then in the past, I'd use a residual right then, like Extendamax and some clethodim like that to take care of any volunteer corn. And then this year, I think I'm just going to do, I don't know, I'm going to do the non-GMO soybeans. So I might do 2 passes and do like a 2,4-D before planting, but still leave the cereal rye growing, and then come back with clethodim or select like 30 days later to terminate the rye.
Okay, so that's on your conventional ground. The stuff
Right.
that's certified organic, how does that look different, and how are you getting cover crops integrated on your certified organic?
Yeah. That's what I hate about the organic stuff, is because you got to wait so long to plant to terminate it, because you got to use the roller crimper when it's in the anthesis to get the roller crimper to work. That's where I think in the organic stuff, I'll probably just stick with the relay cropping, because I can get my soybeans planted like middle of April. And that's when we get a lot of our rain, is April, May. And I got to utilize that. Otherwise, you're stuck at like 40 bushel soybeans planting in June.
Got you.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to ask this later, but I guess I'll ask it now. When you relay crop your soybeans, what is the crop you're relaying with those soybeans?
Just cereal rye and soybeans. Yeah.
Gotcha. So you're actually harvesting the cereal rye, or you're just letting that die? I mean, and letting the cereal rye grow with it. You're not harvesting the cereal rye, are you?
Yeah, I've done it 2 ways. So you can harvest the cereal rye above your soybeans, and then your soybeans will grow up through that stubble. And then one year I couldn't get in there because it was so wet. So the cereal rye fully matured, but the soybeans kind of held it up like stilts, and the soybeans kind of grew up through it. And then I harvested them both at the same time come fall. And it worked really well.
How did you separate them?
Turn the fan speed up on the combine. Just blew it out the back.
So you didn't harvest both of them and then save the cereal, separate them later and save one and the other. They just
I wanted to, but I didn't have the equipment to do that. So
and you were seeding cover crops while you were harvesting. You just put all that rye seed out there. This is brilliant.
Yeah.
Well planned, well executed.
It was so thick.
Yeah, I bet. That's a lot of seed out there.
Yeah.
So what is regenerative agriculture to you guys? When you hear that buzzword regenerative agriculture, what is regenerative agriculture to you?
I don't know. I kind of simplify it and just try to grow with Mother Nature to the best of your ability and not against it, by using all your what is it, the 6 practices?
Yeah.
6 principles of soil health.
Yeah. I mean, just try to implement them and grow with Mother Nature as best as, to the best of your ability.
Yeah, I'd say the same thing. What I was going to say was, to me, I feel you almost have to integrate the 6 principles of soil health, and I feel one of the major ones is livestock. And I integrate livestock through livestock manure. I don't necessarily let my cattle out on all my corn stalks because I don't have enough fencing around everything right now.
Yeah.
And I have rented land that does not have fence on it, nor do they want to put fence on it. So I utilize that through, hauling the manure out there when we can. But yeah, having something growing on that ground as much as possible, minimizing chemical use, minimizing any soil disturbance, and like Kyle said, trying to partner with Mother Nature. I mean, they made us, we started with a system that was already perfect, and we're kind of going in there and trying to control everything, and trying to just let it be and do its own thing, and that's kind of what I feel it is to me.
So follow-up question for you, Kyle. When do you think you're actually going to take regenerative agriculture seriously and integrate livestock?
Aren't microbes livestock?
No, that's not you were supposed to feel shame because you're not implementing actual livestock into your system, and you can't truly be a regenerative farmer unless you do all 6 principles to the way that everybody else thinks that you should be doing them.
I don't know. I spent many years as a child tearing out fence. I got a neighbor that I've worked with in the past, where he would let his cattle out here like in November to graze on my cover crop and whatnot. But man, they put tram lines out there, and
hey, I mean, they're not without headaches. I mean, I love my cattle, but like I missed church on Sunday because I was chasing bulls back into the pasture that got broke by a deer.
But like, honestly, like there's a lot of liability that no one talks about. Like I farm right on the highway. If that was my cattle out there, someone got killed, I could get sued, and I don't really want that liability right now.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it's the same liability though. Like, if I don't think you have to get like Roy Foltzgraff is amazing with what he's doing with regenerative agriculture. He doesn't integrate livestock and he doesn't do cover crops. So, I mean, I think there's a lot of ways to get regenerative agriculture, and I get roasted all the time because on a lot of our dry land, we don't have a living root in the ground at all times.
Sure.
And part of it is because like I'll interseed cover crops so that I'll have living roots the entire year. Well, the cover crops may not germinate, or like on our irrigated, the cover crops germinated, and it literally in 2021 did not rain from when we shut the pivot off till December, or like even after December, like no snow, no nothing. And so we had a huge wind event that was like a 50-year wind event where it blew 100-mile-an-hour, took my topsoil off. And I posted it on a social media sites, or I mean, on or social media group on Facebook saying, hey, you got to be resilient. Sometimes you're going to face this. And you would not believe how many comments people were like, where was your living root? Like, why wasn't there a living root in the ground? Yeah. And I'm like, that like, and I guess that like, that's why I love that they added know your context. So here's a great thing for know your context. Like, what is you guys' annual precipitation?
It's supposed to be 32 inches.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm in mid-30s. I think this year we were like 16 or something or less. Yeah. I need to double check my field view and see what it was. It wasn't much.
How miserable was 16 inches?
Oh, we had phenomenal yields.
Oh, good.
I would prefer it to be almost this dry. A little bit more rain would have been nice.
You shut your mouth. 16 inches is our annual precipitation.
I mean, we had phenomenal yields in our area, like really good. Even the lighter soil yielded really good. We got them 0.3 of an inch and half-inch rains.
Yeah.
When we needed them, and about the time we seen crop stress, boom, we got 0.3 of an inch, and it got us through another 2 weeks,
Yeah. And I think that's why I love know your context, because like, when your average is 16 and we haven't hit 16 for the last 3 years, right now we're on 11.7. Getting things to work can be tough and can be challenging.
I can do that.
But yeah, no. So I think like, and then like Kyle's context, he doesn't have the fencing equipment. He doesn't have, the help to do cattle. Like there's a lot of things that you need to do. to be able to run livestock. And if you enjoy your winters off, livestock's probably not the greatest option.
Yeah.
Like, where do you say you're going on vacation to, Kyle?
Nowhere right now.
Oh, God, yeah. Just kicking it.
I'm hoping somewhere.
So, where did you guys hear about, where do you, I guess before I go on to the compost extract, what's the biggest challenges you guys face in your area when it comes to integrating the 6 soil health principles, and what are the biggest challenges you face on your operation?
That's a good question.
Be livestock for me, but
Boy, I don't know. I guess, I don't know. My biggest challenge is trying to pick up more acres for the amount of manure I have, because I got a 2,400 head hog building, and up until this year, I only farmed 150 acres, but now I picked up a bunch more ground because of my regenerative farming practices. A guy seen me doing it and he liked it, and so I ended up renting his farm. He approached me about that. But land around me is hot. I mean, a farm just sold up the road for me 2 miles, $19,600 an acre. So, you know, rents are high, ground is high around here. So any type of expansion, it's going to cost you a lot of capital to expand. So, you know, livestock wise, I can go buy more livestock. I don't have to worry about that. If I want to expand livestock, I can do that tomorrow. You know, and that's how I kind of first started getting into farming, was with the livestock, because the land was just not available. And that's the biggest downfall for me, is trying to find more real estate to do my soil health practices and expand my regenerative farming operation. That and help. Now, you know, trying to find enough help can be hard, but I've been fortunate enough, but that might be a struggle here in the near future.
Yeah. And for us, like, the biggest challenge is, like, you know, if you want to, we have most people are used to having a fallow period to set up your next crop. And so, like, trying to integrate cover crops into that fallow period, like I've done spring cover crop mixes, and that worked 1 year in a wet spring. And if you don't get a wet spring, you're planting that and you're just allowing kochia to grow rampant. And so then you have a field full of weeds that are tough to kill, because we have just so much of a resistant to herbicides. Doing winter cover crops behind a summer cover crop doesn't really work. I mean, we haven't gotten like a cover crop, like we did planted cover crops, summer mix after wheat harvest, that grew a foot tall and then died. And I mean, a lot of the challenges we faced, like, has been in these last 3 years where it's so dry. And so, like, I've gotten to where I pretty much have given up on doing any mixes on dry land other than summer mixes. And so I'll do a summer mix and then I'll follow it by a fall cash crop like milo or corn. And that's been a challenge. And then I know that integrating cover crops or interseeding cover crops in milo and corn is going to be the answer in the future going forward. But figuring out how to get that to work in a dry year is challenging too. Because I got really good seed to soil contact, and it was just so dry, it like germinated and died. And like the only things that really survived out there were the cowpeas, which kind of surprised me that cowpeas were the most resilient of all the stuff that I had in that.
What equipment did you use to interseed that?
So we just,
I was looking at my drill yesterday when I was finishing up planting my rye, and I was going with my corn stalks, but the implement tires back of my drill were running over the actual rows.
Yeah.
Like, so my drill won't work unless I like put hub spacers or something on there to space out the wheels.
So what we've been using it, like, for people that are watching on YouTube now, we have a video that's interseeding cover crops. You can find it on the video list. And that was, I bought that in 2020. And so that YouTube video is from 2020, but it's a 520 John Deere disc drill, and it's 20 feet long, and it goes on a 3-point hitch. And so we dropped it was on 10-inch spacing. So we dropped every third row off and just did it with that. And that's worked really well. The problem is we bought ours for $1,800 in 2020 off of Big Iron, and now like you can't find something like that for that affordable.
Yeah.
And so like we in fact the next year somebody watched that video after it had come out a year, and they're like, do you mean 18,000? And I'm like, no, 1,800. And he's like, there's no way that you only paid that much.
Yeah.
So,
Drills are really starting to go up.
Yeah.
well, we just purchased a Henniker drill. It's a Henniker interseeder, and I'm really excited about using that. And they priced me a new one, and a new one was like 70,000. And I was like, this one only has, it literally had like the guy had worked like less than a quarter, because he started work like planting the quarter, and the seed company called him back and said no, he was planting certified corn seed, and he was gonna plant this cover crop before he planted the corn seed. And they're like, no, that violates your contract. So he's like, well, there's no point in having this. And so he traded it in for something else. And so we got it for $50-some thousand. And
Wow.
so I wanted to do I wanted to buy different parts and build my own. But when I realized a new Henniker 70 to build one ourselves with all the stuff I wanted on it was going to be over 100,000, I quickly called him back and was like, I'll take that.
Yeah.
So we'll see how well it works. I'm really excited about trying it. And I mean, we should be getting it here. We just set it up to get it hauled. So yeah. Compost extract. So where did you guys find out about compost extract, and what composting systems are you guys familiar with?
I'll let Kyle start this one because I learned from him.
Oh gosh. Let's see. I don't know. Learn everything pretty much off YouTube and podcasts and whatnot. But I was always typing in organic this, organic that, and compost tea always kept popping up. So I'd type in compost tea to YouTube and watch all these videos and this and that. And then Chris Trump always popped up. So I'd watch all of his videos and the Korean natural farming and all this and that. And then David Johnson's videos started popping up, and I'd type in Johnson Soup bioreactor, and then I don't know. And then Chris Teach out down in Southwest Iowa. He was working with Indigo, and the same person I was working with Indigo connected me to him. And then he kind of gave me that idea with the IBC tote. But he was putting a pallet in the bottom. And then I did my first Johnson Sioux that way. And then I modified it by taking the top and flipping it upside down, making that the base, so I wouldn't have treated plywood or whatever down there. But the problem is that it takes a whole year, and I was so eager to get going with it. So then I can't remember how I got in touch with Jeremiah, but finally got in touch with him, and then he made me a bunch of compost extract that I used, and I put it on soybeans, and I got like a 10 bushel increase just on my soybeans. And then the next year, yeah, my Johnson Sioux was ready to go, and I don't know, just haven't looked back ever since.
Yeah. Dude, Jeremiah Picard is probably one of the most amazing minds like of anybody I know. Yeah. And like the way, like when you talk to him, like how fast he talks, it's so crazy. And then to find out he worked for that computer company, and then he decided to go into farming, and then like just figured out everything from just reading because he can't sleep at night. Like that guy's to go from a computer programmer to just be like, oh, I guess I'm going to farm now. Like that just like blows my mind, like how smart he is.
I haven't reached out in a year. I know he kind of did he go belly up during COVID?
Yeah, COVID killed him because his whole system was based off of getting
school districts and
from restaurants.
Yeah, that's sad.
Yeah, and I don't know. He's one I probably need to reach out to do a podcast with, or I mean a YouTube live with, because he's just awesome. So
what was his business like? big red worms or something worms.
Yep. I think that's it anyway. I don't want to say because yeah. But anyway, so Ryan, what was your experience into getting into compost?
Well, I went to a field day at Kyle's that Practical Farmers had on relay cropping because I wanted to try relay cropping. And I went there to learn about relay cropping, and I learned about Korea natural farming and Johnson Sue's. And I was kind of mind blown by it because this was 100%. I'd never even heard of this. It's 100% new to me. It was a completely different way of thinking about, nutrients and nutrient cycling with your plants. And I'd never been taught this. Nobody in my area had ever even heard of this. And I seen what he was doing, and I'm like, well, I want to do this. Like, this is unbelievable. I can do this on my farm, And so I just kept in contact with Kyle, and I immediately started watching YouTube videos and learning a YouTube university, like what he said. And just started watching videos, reaching out to other people that were maybe doing it and just kind of learning. And did buy a few books actually and stuff. And, it kind of goes back to like what Kyle was doing, trying to integrate a little bit of Korean natural farming in with the Johnson Sioux. But that's a whole nother level of stuff, and I'm not into the teas yet just because it's so much work and timing and whatnot. So I just do a simple extract. Let's just start there and we'll work our way up, because there's just so much to learn on this. And I went out, I bought a microscope right away. Like, I want to say a week later or 2 weeks later, I had a microscope ordered. And within 2 weeks, I started making a Johnson Sioux. And unfortunately, it takes a whole year to make. So I used some purchased compost this last year, but I did integrate some Johnson Sioux with it.
Who did you purchase compost from?
I just went to Menards and bought some. They had organic compost, and then they had mushroom compost. And so I used my senses, sight, smell, feel. And I ripped a couple bags open in the store, and I started smelling it and feeling it, looking at it. I'm like, I think this would work to make an extract out of it. It has a really good earthy smell. So I brought it home. I added a little bit of powdery humic acid with it and some leaves out of the timber and stuff, and put it in a big seed bag, like one of them 40 bushel seed bags. And I just watered it and threw some worms in it. And it made really good extract this spring. I microscoped every batch I made. We had fungal hyphae in there, and we had beneficials. It wasn't anaerobic. It worked. We seen a yield response from it. So now I just need to step my game.
I hope people watch this, because that's one of the most recurring questions that I get is people like, hey, I don't want to do Johnson Sioux. Like, where can I buy this stuff from? And so I'm so glad you said that, because that's really cool.
And I want to say I had 40 cents a pound in it. So,
wow.
You put 2 pounds the acre down, I had less than $1 an acre in it, but Zach Wright, learned a lot from him, and he has a composting method that takes 30 days. Yeah. Kyle, what's he call that? Like a thermal pile or something like that? Or
yeah.
And
it's thermal aerobic, right?
Yeah. Yep. And he's
I
got
was going to specifically ask you guys about Zach. So what was you guys' experience working with Zach Wright, and when did that take place?
Well, I ran into Zach, or I kept hearing about Zach because I called down to John. How do you say his last name? Nice Longer. Yeah. Talked to him. Him and Jeremiah are good friends. So I kept hearing this Zach Wright. Supposedly he used to live in Iowa or something like that. But then he was up in Sioux Falls. I'm like, I just need him to get down here to the farm. So got a hold of him. I'm like, what's it going to cost to come down here? He told me. I'm like, all right, come on down. And then he looked through all my stuff. He looked through my Johnson Sioux. He looked through my my IMO pile, which is my KNF pile that we made with Chris Trump. And then he had some more furthering education stuff for me, like making my extract and my teas. And how to balance the pH and stuff like that, because that the KNF, you don't balance your pH when you're making your teas, but he was saying to balance. He was showing me how to use like the dissolved oxygen meter and how you want to keep it above 6 parts, because then you're staying aerobic and not going anaerobic, and just sharing me a lot of his insight and experience. But and then he did some soil sampling for me last last winter. We did a compost class at my farm. I don't know, we just become friends ever since.
Zach is a wealth of knowledge. Like,
Oh yeah.
just, wherever he's at, I'll pay to go and just listen to him and learn from him, because it's well spent money. He's very good.
Yeah. So for people that are watching live, when I talk about in my YouTube videos about my compost going anaerobic and getting help, like Zach is the person that helped me fix my compost and keep it from going anaerobic. And so he like a lot, like as far as like brilliance or whatever, a lot like Jeremiah Picard, just knows this stuff really well. I'm pretty sure he interned or even was employed with Elaine Ingram and was, taught her course underneath her. And now he's got his own program and stuff that he goes around with. And then, so we in Colorado, we had a field day where Zach came and taught his composting method. And the cool thing was he talked about that. And then he also talked about Johnson Sioux and explained the difference in the two. And so anyway, as he was going through that, he kept talking about Kyle Schnell. So Kyle Schnell's method of doing it this way. And like, it was so awesome hearing him say like Kyle's name over and over again. Cause I was like, man, Kyle's a rock star and he doesn't even know it. So all these people are like, okay, so this is the Kyle Schnell method. I'm going to do my composting method this way, because that's the way Kyle Schnell did it, and so, because Zach was just talking about how, like if you're going to do a Johnson Sioux bioreactor and you're in a dry and arid environment, and we're in Eastern Colorado, so most of these dudes farm in a dry and arid environment. And so they're doing they're going to make their bioreactors the way Kyle made them, not the way that people.
He did say he has a bunch of customers down in Texas that use the IBC tote with the cage intact. He said they're having amazing results with it.
Okay, so let's get into that, since a lot of people won't know the Kyle Schnell method versus the traditional Johnson Sioux. So what is different about your method, and how did you come up with this idea? Where did you hear about it from? And how do you think it's worked compared to some other people's Johnson Sioux compost?
Oh, well, Chris Teachout was the one that showed me it, or talked to me over the phone about how to do it. And it made sense because I was about ready to make the round one that David Johnson wants you to make. And he talked me through making this IBC tote one. And I'm like, man, that just makes so much sense. You can fill it with your backhoe or skid loader, whatever. And that's the beauty of it. I can make one in probably 30 minutes. And then,
so break it down. Like, what do you do with the IBC tote in that method that he taught you?
Okay. So you start with your IBC tote container. I take the 2 metal bars or straps off the top, and then I take a 1/2-inch drill bit and drill, I don't know, a couple hundred holes, about like every 2 inches apart on the top of the lid. And then I take my Sawzall and cut that around, and I cut it far enough down to kind of make the curves into the top. So when you flip it over, it kind of cups up a little bit. And then you take bricks or whatever you want to do that's like about 4 inches thick, and put that in the bottom, and then put your lid on top of that. I just took a 4-inch field tile and screwed to it, and then set that down. And then you put your mix in there. I absolutely love wood chips because that allows the whole system to breathe until your worms actually build the air channels to make that breathe. So I use probably
Kyle, so that they understand, are you getting this wet before you put it in the bioreactor?
No.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, building it dry. Yeah, fill in the gaps as needed. So, okay, so then the top, you already have the middle hole where your cap is, right? So that's where one pipe's going to go. And then I get, I don't know, a 4 or 4.5 or 5 inch hole saw and cut my other 4 holes for my pipes to fit in. Put your bricks or tile down there, flip it over, slide your pipes in there without any material, go over there, and then just take your backhoe bucket with your material. I do like a third wood chips, a third leaves, and a third maybe alfalfa or grass clipping, some type of nitrogen material. Blend that all up with your skid loader backhoe, and then just start dumping it in there. And your pipes don't have to be perfectly straight. We'll fix that later. Just get all your material in there and then take it over. And then I got a 2-inch hose that I fill my sprayer, and I just stick that down one of the pipes, or you can put it down to the bottom where your valve is, and you just fill it up. And that material just comes up to the top, and then here comes the water level right to it. And right when it gets to the top, you shut your water off. I let that sit for about an hour and just let that soak. And then I take my forklift and go over to the edge of my rock, and I open the valve and just let all that water drain back down. Now you're 100% saturated, and just start watering once a day, and then you're off to the races.
So Ryan, you want to hear my disaster in trying to do the Kyle Schnell method?
I can only imagine.
So I filled it up, but as I was going, I was like wetting the material, like as I was filling it up, and it like all my material started to float, with the water. Like, and so I was like, oh crap, this isn't gonna work. And so like I just stopped what I was doing, drained it out the bottom, and like made sure everything like was soaked really well, let the water drain out. And then what I did is I just started soaking everything, like really, really soaking it up and throwing it in there to where it was really way wetter than what it should be. And then I just let it seep out the bottom, like Kyle would have after, if did its deal. So I if you're going to do Kyle's method, make sure that you fill the thing completely full before you start adding water so that your ingredients don't float. Otherwise you're getting it.
It raises up maybe like 2 inches or something like that. But I guess there's enough pressure there for the square footage or whatever. It doesn't fall out. It just kind of reaches like an equilibrium or something.
Worried about it like falling out, you could always put like chicken wire on top of there and put some bricks on top of the chicken wire, because then that would keep that down. I'm guessing it would. I don't actually know if that would what it would do. But anyway,
I don't know.
I know that the doing it that way that I did it ended up working out fine. And one of the things that I had worried about, like in the beginning when my stuff went anaerobic, is trying to figure out why did it go anaerobic. And I was starting to think, what if it was the feed truck? And what if it did have too much sand particles in there? And what if that's what the problem was? So like I went away from doing it that way. And I'm like, well, I can teach my kids hard work. And so I just had my kids fill the bioreactors. And so, but the first one I did your way, and it was super wet. I didn't run that through the bath. I just soaked it, threw it in there, and it was just straight corn stalks, and it never went anaerobic. So I am now convinced that it had nothing to do with the feed truck. It was the fact that I was using oat hay, which was green when the oats were put up, alfalfa, which is super high in nitrogen, and manure, which is super high in nitrogen. So Kyle, this leads me to my next point. Why do your ingredients matter when you're filling up a bioreactor?
Well, you got a couple of things, right? You got your C to N, your carbon to nitrogen ratio, that matters. You have the structural property of your material going in, that matters. Wood chips is so important because that gives that structure and creates the air passages to allow it to be aerobic until your red wigglers make those channels for you. Your C to N matters because if you have too much nitrogen, it's going to get too hot. It's going to kill off your diversity. I know a lot of people on Facebook say that David says no matter what, you're going to still have the same diversity at the end. That's bull honky. You've done it. I've done it. Ryan's done it. We all got our DNA test, and all three of ours are different. So no matter what you do, it does matter.
Oh yeah. Well, and I mean, I was thinking about that too. Like, you know, you stopped by my house and you gave me your compost, and like I inoculated every single one of my piles with your compost. And then I thought about it later. I'm like, I'm going to freaking do a DNA test later, and I'm going to have DNA from Ryan's compost that I'll never probably have again, unless I continue to inoculate everything with all these piles. And I was thinking about that. I'm like, I think even with doing it the way we're doing it, if you made sure that all of your materials were all all the same every single year, and you're doing the same ratios, I think the DNA test would come back different every single year. So I think, and that kind of makes it to where it's like, I think you have a hard time selling Johnson Sioux other than like to local people, just because how are you going to guarantee what the DNA is every time? And then are you going to pay the $400 test every single time to verify that the ingredients are what the ingredients are?
Yeah, that gets complicated when it gets to that. I mean, I've talked to guys that are like, well, how can I get something similar to the Johnson Sioux like right now without making it? And I'm like, you have a timber in your backyard. I'm like, take your skid loader out there and scoop up some timber soil with some leaves and, stuff in it. I said, filter off that dirt. I'm like, that's basically compost. Like, it's timber soil that's never been touched, that had leaves and branches dropped on it and deer walking through pooping on it. Like, that's organic soil compost, really. It's virgin timber ground. Filter it off.
That works for everybody in Iowa, for everybody that lives like Kansas, Arizona, and all these places that are a virtual desert that they don't have a forest
that don't work then.
Walking to get that stuff.
Well, Jay, I got one thing to say yet.
Are you good?
On one of mine that I made this year, I did take some of my IMO 4, which does have some soil mixed in with it. And I did mix that in as part of my ingredients. And it was so thick that it actually did go anaerobic until my my worms went through there to make the air passageways, and then it went back aerobic. Because I did like 2/3 probably of my mix, and then I did the top third of my IMO, and it had so much clay in there that the air couldn't pass through it, and it went anaerobic for a little bit. Got the flies and stuff like that. But then I did my heat cycle. It did this year I did my thermophilic stage outside in a pile to where I could flip it like every 2 days. Once it got up to 120 degrees, I flipped it. And then once it got up to 120 degrees, I flipped again. And I did that thermophilic stage for like maybe 10 days. So then when I actually put that material in my Johnson Sioux, it never went through a thermophilic stage. I wanted to test it that way. So once I realized that it went anaerobic, I threw the worms in as quick as possible. And it probably took 20 days for them to build their air passageways. And then it went back to aerobic.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's an important thing for people to talk about too. This is like, I think the people that are saying that your ingredients don't matter are right in the sense that, like, if you wait a long enough time and you get enough worms in there, the worms are going to do the work to get it to where it's not anaerobic anymore. Yeah. Like, it can be anaerobic most of summer, and eventually the worms are going to turn it up. The thing is you will be much more bacteria dominant. And until someone does an all grass or all manure bioreactor and then shows me their DNA samples that are like, hey, look, it's fungus to bacteria ratio is even though it went anaerobic, and maybe I don't want to say that theirs is going anaerobic. I have not had the experience where I did another grass one this year. I did a grass one, took it through the bath perfectly. It goes anaerobic. If it's straight grass, it's going to go anaerobic. Like, there's
I think you got two things going against you. One, you got way too much nitrogen. It's going to get way too hot. It's going to kill off all your fungal communities. And then 2, bacteria food. It's just going to eat it up. And then you're going to get that actinomyces or whatever it's called. And it seems like once that proliferates through, it's hard to get the fungal communities back into it.
Yeah.
So it's just like, I don't know, you're starting with an uphill battle. I'm sure you can do it, but you're stuck inside of a cage. You can't manipulate it and turn it like you can like other compost systems. I mean, this is a static system. So I don't know. You got to know that kind of stuff going into it.
So what are some things that have intimidated you guys, either about compost or regenerative ag, or anything that you've had to do or take on in the area of doing regenerative ag?
I would say for compost, not knowing enough about microbes, like what's beneficial, what's not, but then having like Chris Trump, Zach Wright, that Ryan Noss,
Yeah.
having all these experts look at my stuff and say, oh man, this is amazing. The DNA testing, all this stuff just builds confidence to like, okay, I know I got good stuff going out in the soil and I didn't mess it up. I was afraid that it was anaerobic and I didn't know, but through expertise, I don't know, I built that confidence and not afraid of it anymore.
Got you. What about you, Ryan?
Well, for me, like when I went to no-till, I knew it would work. We had to make some modifications to the planter, and then we incorporated cover crops, within a year of switching over to no-till. And then the next thing is, well, we're getting the planter set up, but we still got to have our fields looking picture perfect. We can't have weeds in our field because we're in an area where people judge each other very quickly. And like if there is weeds in your field, every neighbor will be talking about it. And so now in the last 2 years, if the neighbors aren't talking about what I'm doing, I'm not trying hard enough. So like I'm always trying something different. Now it's catching the eye of people and they're like, hey, we like what he's doing and it seems like it's working pretty good. And I share with people like what I'm doing, like, hey, yeah, it's working really good. We're profitable doing this. And when it came to the compost stuff and the extract, I didn't have I guess I never felt that it wouldn't work, because I'm looking at this like, well, it's not that hard. You just make compost, you filter it, turn it into a liquid form, and put it in furrow. Like, and if you're going to microscope it, what's in it. So it's either aerobic or it's anaerobic. If it's anaerobic, we're not going to put it down. If it's aerobic and we got fungal hyphae and good stuff in there, put it down. It can't possibly hurt nothing. That's kind of the way I looked at it. Like, hey, this is gonna work. I did on all my acres except for check strips that I left without it. That's how I convinced I was it was going to work. So instead of leaving just check strips with it, I did everything, except for check strips without it. So I actually had I took my drone up and took a picture of my field this spring, and you could see a yellow streak in the field where we didn't put compost extract. And I went and showed it to my neighbor, and he's like, he goes, I'm a believer just by seeing that. I didn't even have to walk out in your field, but we walked out the field and you could see right where the yellow flags are and where we didn't put it and where we did put it. So, I mean, it worked. I didn't have any doubt that it wouldn't work. My biggest doubt was, am I going to be able to get this stuff made in time to get in the planter? And, is it filtered enough? Stuff like that, because I didn't want to plug up orifices and stuff. But I didn't have no doubt about it. My biggest doubts were making my crops look beautiful. So that way, I can compete against the guy down the road that's running 4,000 acres and dumping on 300 pounds of anhydrous and, ripping it and finishing it 3 times. And, I want my field to look just as good as his with a third of the inputs.
Yeah.
So
it's funny, like when I don't know why, but I had always, and I don't, at the time, I don't realize I'm being insecure. Like I almost think like, I'm like, I'll get to that. And then I don't get to it. And I think about it later, I'm like, well, the reason I'm not getting to that is because I'm afraid I'm going to screw up, like the Haney test. Like I have not done a Haney test I've done the complete soil digestion test, and I've done like tissue sampling on my plants and stuff. But like we've just relied on our local agronomist rather than doing the Haney test. And I feel really stupid for not ever just stepping up and being like, all right, I'm going to do the Haney test, and then I'm going to figure out like what everything means. But like before, I was always like, well, I need to look into what the Haney test is so I understand it before I send off a sample. And then I would just push it off, and then it would be past the time I need to do a Haney test. I'm like, oh, I'll do it next year. And then I never got around to doing it. And I like realizing now, like I'm like, 2016, so 6 years into my soil health journey, I'm like, I've never done a Haney test. Like that's ridiculous. And then like the microscope deal, like when John Neiswanger was talking about reading this, like figuring out what's under the biology underneath the microscope, I'm like, no way, dude, I'm not, that's not for me. I hate biology, like, and really, really intimidated about it. But like ever since I started getting into the compost, the biology's got me really excited. And so now like I've gone from, being intimidated by it, being really excited about it. So I think, but now it's just the time. Like, when do I fit in the time? Because, I've got a bull sale I've got to prepare for that happens in March. And then I've got to deliver bulls in April. It kind of limits the window that I can actually, put in the time to learn, to take a class on how to do the microscope. But, I've looked at stuff enough with John that, and he's like, this is this, that if I see stuff like I'm like, I know that's fungal hyphae. I know those are fungal spores. I know those are bacteria. I know what a ciliate is. So if I see a crap ton of ciliates in my compost, I know that compost is no good, which is kind of funny though. Like you don't really need a microscope to tell if compost is bad. Like if it smells like crap, you're going to see ciliates in it. If it doesn't smell terrible, you're probably not going to see ciliates in your compost. But yeah, so I mean, those are some of the things that, I think about it later, like looking back on it now, it's like, I didn't realize how insecure I was about something that there was really nothing to be insecure or to think that, you're not capable of doing something. So I think that leads me to my next question is, and if you guys are watching on YouTube Live, you've asked questions, we'll get to your questions here in a little bit. I can't be distracted reading a question and listening to the guy's answers. I'm not talented enough to read a question and listen to the rest of it, or what the guys' answers are. So what do you guys think hold people back from doing regenerative agriculture?
You asking me, Kyle, that?
I don't know. I'd say like the fear of standing out, not being a leader. Like Ryan likes when people talk about him. I guess I kind of like it too, but I don't know. It's the fear of failing, not knowing what's on the other side.
Yeah.
I think it seems like if one guy in our area, his crops don't look quite as good because he had a cover crop in, nobody else wants to try that, because everybody wants their corn to be the darkest green color. They want their bean fields to be green beans, and they want them black in between the rows. That's how they want them. They want that picket fence perfect, and that's what people judge each other off of up in our area. They want a field painted black with green lines in it, and I think there's a lot of guys that just don't want to do that. They don't want to do it the way that, some of us other people have been trying to do it, and I mean, there's also guys up in my area that just love running tractors. And I think they just love driving tractors across their field 8 times. I don't know, I'd rather be at home playing with the kids, or, drinking beer and driving around looking at crops and, working in the shop. I mean, I got livestock, so that keeps me busy quite a bit too. So I got other things I can do with my time besides burning $4 diesel fuel.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, it's like, you think about different people that are, or I think about people that are like my mentors, or even talking to you guys, it's like, you're not afraid of making mistakes. And I think that there has to be that level of, being an entrepreneur, like type mindset, or a mindset that it's like, I'm not afraid of failing, whereas like there's other people that want all the answers. They want to know how it's going to work, what way it's going to work. And, you know, like I've so many people, when I tell them about what we're doing, they're like, you figure it out on your operation and then tell us how it works. And then we'll try it then. So I think there's so much of that holds people back. And then, you know, there's just all that confirmation bias with some of these regenerative agriculture guys that, you know, they get this tunnel vision and they don't, they just end up being hypocrites because they just want to verify what they believe. You guys catching what I'm saying?
Oh yeah.
Well, that, and if the co-op doesn't sell, you know, they sell NP and K, so that's what you need to grow a crop. If the co-op sold compost extract, then farmers would be like, well, it's got to work if the co-op sells it, you know, and then they might take a notion to it, but you can't, you know, most farmers, you can't say that the most important thing in their soil for fertility is soil health and microbes. They're going to say, no, in order for me to grow a crop, I got to have NP and K and sulfur. That's what it takes to grow a crop. You know, it doesn't take microbes. I need fertilizer. It's like, no, yes and no. You know, yeah, you need fertility, but the biology will make fertility, you know, and the biology will make more than fertility. It'll make everything in your system work, you know, and co-ops don't sell biology.
Yeah.
We don't have any agronomists in our area that have a microscope. And I've talked to 3 different co-ops about that. And I said, I will work with your agronomist if your agronomist will get a microscope and learn how to run it. Then I'll do business with you.
Well, because I was referring to that agronomist that made that TikTok video, like saying that I was going off of, like, everything I was saying was from my own confirmation bias, and he was pointing out my hypocrisy, you know, in what I was doing and what I was saying. It was funny because, like, I reached out, I searched that guy, and like it popped up. And so I was like, I'm gonna text this guy. So I texted him. I was like, hey, I can answer these questions that you put in your TikTok video. And he responded, and to me it sounded like that he was gonna call me. And then I showed my buddy, and he's like, no, dude, that guy's ghosting you. There's no way he's gonna call you. And I was like, whatever. And so, like, I was planning on making a YouTube video, like, addressing the things that he said, because he's like, you know, he's a hypocrite, and here's his his confirmation bias, because he did this research and he just made it say whatever he did. And like he said, he only found one research backing it up. And I'm like, you didn't do a good enough Google search, or you did a Google search and found one article, read the one article, used that, and then used it for your own confirmation bias, which was so ironic because he's calling me a hypocrite, saying I'm using confirmation bias. And that's exactly what he's doing in his YouTube video. And so I was like, I was thinking about how to do that, and like, you know, how to do it like right, to where I wasn't being a jerk to him and just explaining things. And I was like, no, that's a terrible idea. Because then if I start doing that, then I have to make a video or a deal explaining every single person's troll comment on my YouTube videos, or a guy that, you know, every time somebody makes a TikTok video or something trashing me, I'm like, this is not the best road to go down.
You won't get anything done. That's all you'll be doing all day is responding to people.
Did you guys see the one comment where the guy said that I was part of a government conspiracy to convince people to outlaw fertilizers, that the government should outlaw fertilizers?
I didn't see that.
Yeah, I'll text you guys afterwards. It's on the phosphorus problem deal, but the guy was basically like that. I like what we have here is the liberal media planting some guy, you know, with a flannel shirt, you know, using proper lingo to suggest authenticity, and all it was for was to get people to convince the public that to outlaw fertilizers, and that's why YouTube was pushing my video.
Wow.
I when I read that one, I died laughing. That was probably my favorite comment I've gotten. The most common recurring one that I'm kind of surprised by is like, people are like, do you still use glyphosate? And I'm like, oh great, I know where this is going. I'm like, yes, I still use glyphosate. And they're like, are you aware how detrimental that is to your biology? I'm like,
yeah,
yes, it also kills weeds. Do you guys have like questions for each other, or for me, or anything before we get into some of these or questions that we got from the viewers?
Yeah, so this fall, I treated all my cover crop seed with compost extract. Like all the seed that went on my farms got treated with compost extract, like a slurry. Like I made it in a 5-gallon bucket and I dumped it in a mixer mill with like 2,000 pounds of seed. And then I also put humates with it, like a humic acid, fulvic acid powder, granular powder. And so the seed had like a black coating on it. And I was wondering, are you doing any of that? Being your moisture is so low, would putting, the extract and maybe a humate with the seed help it to germinate with less moisture and produce a better root system with more hairs and, whatnot on it?
Well, when we're doing stuff that we're treating the seed, we typically get more compost in the extract, because I don't need to strain it. It's not like it's going through the planter. And so like, I would say that slurry is a lot thicker than what's going in furrow. Maybe I'm already doing that. I don't know that it's to the degree that you're doing that, but it sure didn't work this last time on the dry land. But I mean, the thing I love about it is this is like night and day difference in seeing the difference in the seed and on that's been treated as opposed to like the cover crop seed. The seed that's been treated as opposed to like the seed that hasn't been treated. It's amazing how night and day different it is. Okay, it's funny. I'm trying to pull up the questions, and I'm having a hard time pulling up the questions and the Zoom deal at the same time. I guess I don't need to see the Zoom deal as long as it's going. Okay, so before I read some of these, Kyle, did you have another one?
No, I'm good.
All right, so this question right here: how much did the Bio 5 compost cost? Thinking of doing similar things with trials. Bio 5 compost, I believe right now is $1. At most, it's $2 a pound. And then like there's other, there's several guys in Kansas that sell vermicomposting. So I'm assuming if you search in your state compost that you can purchase and do the different ones, do Johnson Sioux, do vermicomposting, do thermal composting, then put for sale or purchase that type of compost, chances are you'll be able to find somebody in your area, or get on your local or get on your Facebook groups that you may be on and ask them if you're on Facebook or social media, and ask those groups, where they purchase some of their compost. I think this is more of a question for you, Ryan. It says, so if I had a large pile of compost manure, like 4+ years old, would that work if it was mixed with old hay, like 3 to 5 years old, and timber in that ground system? So I'm assuming he's meaning like what you were talking about, Ryan, about just grabbing random stuff and seeing if it works. Do you think that would work in what he's talking about?
If he's planning on just like taking that and filtering it and washing it and using it as an extract, best thing I can say is, first of all, use your senses. Like if that manure's been sitting for 4 or 5 years, it's probably composted pretty decent. Whereas manure that's been just sitting for a year is going to be basically anaerobic. It's still manure. Like it's got the smell, the texture, everything. So use your senses and smell it. Does it smell earthy? Does it feel, like earthy feel, or is it mucky, or whatnot? If he wants to use that to make like a Johnson Sioux or make a bioreactor or whatever, yeah, you could use that manure and also the like timber leaves, grass, and mix that all together. I like to do like a 40-40-20% ration, like 40% woody material, 40% like straw and greenery, and then 20% nitrogen, which would be like your manure. But as if that's how I would mix it to make a bioreactor. But if he wants to just use that to filter, I'd be kind of cautious on the manure side of it, that it's not anaerobic and it's not manure. If it's composted really good, it's probably still going to be bacteria dominant, but it might still work. Best thing you do is look at it under the microscope. Make a small batch in a 5-gallon bucket. Look at it under the microscope.
Yeah, and if you're asking that if for making Johnson Sioux compost, I think that stuff would all work for Johnson Sioux compost. But I would have, when we talk about ingredients mattering, I would say you definitely want more carbon-based source in your compost. So I like to use 60% like carbon source, like wood chips, ground up corn stalks, ground up leaves, or wheat straw, something like that was brown when it died. Not something like, you think about hay that's put up, that hay may turn brown, but when it was put up, it was green. So you don't want to get too dominant on those, in my opinion. You'll find other people who do Johnson Sioux. Diego Footer's a guy that has a YouTube channel that's pretty popular. Diego Footer claims that he's done straight horse manure. I know somebody else that said that's straight horse manure, that he did straight horse manure, but he said it smelled really, really good. And I'm sure it's got it worked. And I'm not saying that he's lying or anything. I'm just saying, I would think that would at some point go anaerobic, and maybe it didn't. But that he's been doing it for a while. So, this next question, advice for a first generation row crop farmer who is growing their operation and wanting to go towards regenerative ag.
Start small. Like, let's say you farm 200 or 300 acres, do 20 acres of no-till and cover crop, or, just no-till the first year and then integrate a cover crop on that 20 acres the following year, and stick with it at least 3 years, because sometimes you might not see a huge response the first year. You might actually go backwards yield wise the first year, but it's a long-term investment, and like now that we're 3-4 years in it, our soil is dramatically changed, just by integrating that, and educate yourself, learn how to read soil tests, do Haney tests, do a plant sap analysis, try that on a small scale, and then work up from there, and reach out to people like us, or even people that are in your neighborhood that are doing it, and talk to them about how to set up your planter, what crops to do, or rotation wise, and stuff like that.
Kyle, any other advice on that?
Yeah, I don't like what Ryan said, like start small, but even if you're starting small, have 10 to 20% of your acres that like scare you. Like you don't know the outcome, that you're constantly testing yourself. Something that, I don't know, just an idea that you dreamt up at nighttime that you want to pursue. Find somebody that you can lean on and learn from them as well. I don't know, but
yeah. And I got into regenerative agriculture just so that I could raise cattle on cover crops. And so I spent the first few years like leaning on those crutches of like, well, I have dyslexia, like I'm never going to know as much as the guy that is speaking at this conference, and I let these self-doubts kind of drive me. And I really encourage you, like, do not be intimidated by anything. If there's something that you don't know, research it more. Like if there's somebody's at a conference and they say something that you don't know what the heck they're talking about, write that down, write whatever that word was or whatever it is. Ask them at the end of his talk, or then go do a Google search and study that until you understand that particular thing. And then just grow. All of us, you have to start at a beginning point, and I don't know, 90% of what I know now, I've learned in the last, since 2020, because I've worked a lot harder at understanding these things than I did the first 4 years of doing regenerative agriculture because of being intimidated. So I really encourage you, don't be intimidated, really, chase after things, read books. You mentioned that earlier, Ryan. What books do you suggest for them to read for if they're getting into regenerative agriculture?
Well, I guess there's a couple of them. It depends what you want to read on. Do you want to read on like soil biology, compost tea, or do you want to read on like cover crop, livestock
Just give them a
integration?
list of books you've read that you'd like.
So there's a couple books that I got. I have not fully read. I kind of just skimmed through because they got a lot of pictures and stuff. Dale Strickler has got a couple good books on pasture management, soil regeneration, and whatnot. He's with Green Cover Seed, but he also wrote some books that are really good. I bought some of those. They got a lot of good ideas in them. Some of them aren't necessarily going to work in your area, depending on where you're at in the country, but other ones will. There's a lot of really good stuff in there. There's a book I printed off. It's God, I don't know, it's probably 20 or 30 or 40 pages of how to make compost extract, what to look for under the microscope. And it was written by Elaine Ingham. It was emailed to me. I can't remember who emailed it to me, but it's basically like a book. It's like 40 pages of stuff, and it's got a few pictures in it. And that's really good. Talks about, the whole soil food web. And, sometimes watching videos, I almost got to watch a video 3 times to understand it. But if I read something and it's quiet when I'm reading, it seems like it goes in my mind a little bit better and it sticks with me better. So I just kind of read a bunch of that on, how to make a biological product at home, When it comes to cattle business, if you want to read a good cattle business book, Handshake Code of the West by Clayton Jennings. It's probably the best book out there. It talks about doing business with cattle. And that's a really good book written by a guy who farmed back in the 60s and 70s. He owned thousands of acres in the Dakotas, and he started the Black Angus industry in the United States. It's a very good book. But yeah, there's a lot of good ones. Just talk about business, soil biology, cover crops, livestock integration.
I think Dirt by David Montgomery is a great book to read. I think if you read Dirt, you're going to be like, oh, I'm never going back. I'm not going back to tillage, because it's just amazing how many civilizations throughout history have destroyed their agriculture and their land by years and years and years and years of tillage. Nicole Masters' book, For the Love of Soil, I just finished that a month ago, and that's so good. I listened to it. I listen to most of these books. I'm going to go back and read it and take notes from the last 2 chapters, because in the last 2 chapters, she really gets into detail about how the proper, regenerative system can, protect your plants or get your plants strong enough that they're not going to be attacked by parasitic funguses. They're not going to be attacked by bugs, because bugs want to eat plants that are unhealthy. So there's some amazing books out there in regards to soil. Gabe Brown has a book. I didn't get all the way through it, not because it wasn't good, but I started reading it right before calving season last year. And then I didn't get anything done till after the bulls were delivered. And then by then, I hadn't had a chance to pick it up again. So anything Gabe Brown does is really good. He's the guy that got me into doing regenerative agriculture. So
is that one called like Dirt to Soil or something?
Yeah, I think so.
That's a good book.
Yeah. Let's see here. So Kyle, did you have any books to add to that?
Well, I was just looking. I like this one, When Weeds Talk.
Oh yeah, I've heard of that one. Who wrote that one?
Jay McCammon, something like that. I got it on Amazon. And then this is like KNF, but Jadam. So it's a whole nother.
I got that one too.
Yeah. So then this is the pest and disease control. And then trying to figure out what the other one. I loaned them out to my neighbor.
This is a good one. That's backwards. Mineral nutrition and plant disease.
What's that one?
This book is like $150 book, but it will tell you if there is a disease on your plant, why that disease is there, like what caused it. Like tar spot is huge up in our area. Everybody's worried about tar spot in their corn. Well, tar spot is a direct correlation to a copper deficiency in corn, wheat, grass species plants. If it's got tar spot, it's caused by a copper deficiency. Well, all the co-ops are like, you gotta spray fungicide, That's the only way you're going to get ahead of tar spot. None of them will tell you that it's a copper deficiency in your plant. So if you want to do a foliar application of a copper, you can minimize that instead of putting fungicide down. So, I mean, that book costs $150. You'll make that back in the first year.
Yeah.
You know, so.
I was thinking of the books I lend out was like teaming with fungi, teaming with microbes, teaming with bacteria.
That's a great one.
Yeah. I was also thinking, no one really asked, but like a lot of what I'm learning now comes from like the cannabis industry, and just because it's so profitable and like what they're doing with their compost teas, the sap testing, all that kind of stuff. So I'm learning through podcasts and YouTube stuff, just trying to follow what those guys are doing as well. And they're making like their own ferments and things like that.
They're good guys to listen to because they'll try anything. And it's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
I think that's a great point, because you look at cannabis growers, they have so many restrictions on what they can do with their crop, like, and what it can have for like THC levels. And if they're just outside that range just a little bit, they've got to burn that entire crop. So it's when you talk to the ones that are successful, like they know their stuff, because they have to be able to raise that crop right. It's not like you can just, make a little mistake here or there. Like if they make a mistake, they're in a lot of trouble.
Have you watched Harley Smith? He's one of my favorites.
No, I'm not familiar with him.
Yeah, he's really good. He talks about plant nutrition, and he was a scientist over in Netherlands as well. And he found out how amino acids really affect the plant and how it's balanced nutrition, and that you want to have fungus and insect pressure or anything like that, because it increase the Brix levels so high. But yeah, he's a good one to watch.
Okay, we'll wrap it up with this question right here. If we are trying to emulate nature as best as possible, could you create an extract from a hay field that has not been touched in 5 to 10 years? Would it contain the fungus and the bacteria? So I would say that you would want, if you're wanting to do something that is going to get the best fungus to bacteria ratio, then get some hay from that field, grind it up and mix it with wood chips. And add maybe some manure if you have access to manure. And one thing to remember too is, like, if you're going to use grass clippings, make sure that there wasn't, fungicides treated on your grass. I thought about this year because I've used quite a bit of grass clippings in a lot of mine. We have dogs in our backyard, so I'm getting dog crap in that grass. I can't imagine that. Canine poop is not good for compost. So you don't want to be composting canine or cat manure. Like, that's not good for your compost. So like if you have grass, don't use that as a grass clipping, or don't use those grass clippings. I guess I'm going to find out whether or not it worked, because half of mine had that grass from that. But yeah, so I would say if you're going to do it, use that hay. But what I would make sure that you're doing is use it in the extract, and make an extract with that. Make a Johnson Soup bioreactor or a thermal aerobic pile from that hay, if you're going to do it.
Yeah, I just don't think there's going to be any fungal component to it at all.
You mean if you're
going to have much at all in it?
Yeah, just a high nitrogen source. There's nothing for the fungi to live off of.
Sure, that's what I'm saying is you would need to make an extract out of that. I think that they're talking if they got hay or the dead residue underneath the hay, or some of that soil that's been made from that hay field is, I think, what they're asking.
Yeah, and I think it's more of a soil question. You're right. But we went to like a native prairie that's 100 and some years old, native ground, and it was still bacterial dominated. This is ground that hasn't been touched for over 100 years, and it was still bacteria dominated.
And I'm guessing that's probably because it's mostly grass species that are growing there. You
Well,
know, there's not big woody trees in a prairie, you know, and a timber soil tends to have a more fungal dominant soil versus a prairie soil, just because of all the leaves and the different diverse, you know, weeds and grasses and legumes or anything that's growing in that timber. It's so much more diverse than a prairie, in my opinion.
Yeah. Guys, I've really enjoyed this. The last question I want to ask you is, what are you going to do in 2023 that's new for your farming operation?
I'm going to try to treat my seed and do in furrow compost extract.
Okay.
And I'm going to mix all my nutrients ahead of time, so I'm not spending like 3 hours every day mixing all my nutrients before I go plant. I want to have them all, like, each field in an IBC tote ready to go, so I just pump it onto my planter, add my liquid, and go.
So for this year, I planted 6 species. I'm up to 6 species now in my ground going into corn. Going into cereal rye, or going into soybeans, I'll be planting into just cereal rye. But going into corn, we got Blonza fixation clover, Australian winter peas, hard red winter wheat, hairy vetch, winter camelina, and some oats. That's basically just a 6 different species mix. So that's the most I've ever done. So I'm trying to diversify more species to build up my soil health. And that'll be going into corn. I did treat that seed. Next year, I'm going to plant some naked seed, is what I call it, basically untreated seed corn, which I've never done before. I planted untreated beans, but I've never planted untreated corn. So I'm going to get a hold of some untreated corn, non-GMO, and I'm setting a yield goal of 300 bushel on that.
Yeah.
And that's going to be with very minimal nutrients, basically hog manure, side dress a little bit of nitrogen, sulfur. You know, we're going to do plant sap analysis to see what we need. But I am going to treat that seed with compost extract and probably a humate. But I'd like to get to like well under a half a pound per bushel of actual N applied, you know, and do it with untreated seed. And I think it can be done. I know it can be done. I just haven't done it yet. And I've got people that are skeptical of what I'm doing. So anytime that someone says I can't do it, I just tell them I will do it. Yeah. So, you know, they said no-till cover crop wouldn't work. I said, I'll
you're talking half pound like synthetic fertilizer or added nitrogen, right?
Yeah. And I'd kind of like to also consider,
because you're going to do a Haney test in the spring.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll be doing Haney test, plant sap analysis. I know where I made mistakes this year, and we had like mid 200 bushel corn this year, and it could have easily been close to 300 bushel corn, but I made mistakes that cost me that were simple mistakes that, you know, now I've learned. So in the last year, I've learned more about soil biology and how it relates to fertility and fungal bacteria, nematodes, all this stuff, and cover crop mixes. I've learned more in the last year and a half than what I've learned in my entire life. And we've made some early mistakes this year that cost us some yield. And, I mean, we're cutting back on herbicide by 50% year over year. We cut back on all of our fertility. We haven't put down potash or phosphate the last 2 years, just livestock manure, you know, and we've been cutting back a lot, and we're still pushing yield. So I have everybody telling me, they're like, yeah, it takes yield to make money. And I said, well, you know, it's profit per acre that makes money, not necessarily yield. You know, I've lost yield, but I've made more money because I was able to cut my costs by a lot. So now it's like, now I got to push that yield envelope because that's what everybody talks about. So
yeah, It's funny how many comments I got in that video that I made about 200 bushel corn without applying nitrogen. Like people are like, well, if you would have applied, fertilizer, you'd have made 300 bushel corn. I'm like, yeah, we've never raised 300 bushel corn, genius. So thanks for that advice. Yeah. So for us, we bought that Henniker, and I'm going to interseed a lot more cover crops this year. We are going to make some teas this year and do them in furrow. And so all of our fertilizer applications on our irrigated circles, which one of our landlords sold some of the stuff we were renting for, on our irrigated. So we're down to 7 circles, and we got enough water on to do 3 of those full corn. But anyway, on the 3 circles that we'll do, no, 4, sorry. So next year, the 4 circles we had, enough water to do full corn on, we'll be fertigating that, and then the rest of it will get cover crops and the cattle will graze on it, and then we'll flip them back and forth like we always do. But that's really, you know what, I'm going to try to do thermal aerobic composting this year as well, just so I have another option if I get to it. I've got to get to it. And then, like I said, I'm still wanting to do the whole look at stuff underneath a microscope. And then obviously I'm going to do the Haney test this year and work a lot closer with Lance on being able to understand that, and so that we can kind of teach it on a better level. And then, we're going to be doing more of these YouTube live events, and I've learned a lot from tonight's first event. Thank you guys for making this a huge success. I feel like this was awesome, and it did not blow up in my face like I was concerned that it might when we first kind of suggested this. So real quick before we go, Ryan, somebody just asked, what was the book called that told you what every disease was that your plant could get, what it meant, or
it was hold on here, let me look it back up again. I just sent the link for it to a family member who wanted the book. It's called Mineral Nutrition and Plant Disease. Now, according to Amazon, it's unavailable right now.
I got it if somebody wants it.
Yeah, Kyle's got it too. That's a good book. You can look up any disease, Goss's wilt, tar spot. It's got it all in there. It's a really good book. But
do you guys have a Google?
Do you guys have guys do a fungicide to try to get rid of a disease and prevent it from getting worse when, if you got a healthy plant, you won't have the disease in the first place. Do you guys
have a Google account like for YouTube?
Yeah.
Okay. If you guys have questions, if they have questions, do you guys mind answering these questions if I see them pop up and they're for one of you guys?
We'll just have to do a part 2.
There you go. I want to do another one next year in November or December, and I want to focus more on interseeding cover crops and see how things went for you, Ryan. Are you going to interseed cover crops next year, Kyle?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So maybe we can do one where we focus more on, I was going to get more into that, but shoot, we're already an hour and a half into it. So I think we'll just save that topic for next year and go over it next year. And then, maybe even do another one, Ryan, where we talk about how you're grazing stockers on those cover crops, like how that's working as far as increasing value in your ground. Because that's another thing that people don't think about is it's like if you're interseeding cover crops and you have that yield loss, if you're able to get how many more days of grazing and put pounds on cattle, the value that adds to your program as well.
The feeder cattle putting weight on. With what the feeder cattle market is now, man, you're putting weight on. It don't take long to make money per acre putting weight on cattle.
It's insane.
Insane.
So, all right, thanks a lot. And guys, if you have people that you would like me to try to reach out to do a YouTube live, let me know. If you have suggestions on what I need to do to make it better, go ahead and put those in the comments as well. That's pretty much all I have for you guys. And we'll end it at that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, you guys, did I leave the YouTube live? I don't know how to know if it's off. You do to make it better. Go ahead and put those in the comments. I think it is off. Wouldn't it be funny if it's still live streaming and people are like, no, Jay, it's not off.
It says it's live on YouTube, so.
I did pretty good. I never cussed.
Yeah, it's not over. Hold on one second. Let me see about.
I don't know how to know if it's off.
That's funny. This is the joys of doing it for the first time.
Like live streaming and like people are like, no, Jay, it's not on.
And you can hear like the feedback from the other deal. Let me let's do this. This is the joy of doing it live for the first time and not knowing how to actually end it. See, I wanted to